On the 17th of January 2019, the entire peaceful town of Riverdale discovered a shocking incident. A horror that had never happened in the history of the town had been uncovered. A high school teacher, Jennifer Holson, was found brutally murdered and buried in the forest with holes and semen on her body. According to the detectives in charge of the case, none of them had seen a murder victim look so horrendous. It was obvious that whoever was responsible for Jennifer's murder suffered cases of extreme psychopathy, derangement, and mental instability. After the investigation, no one would have expected the reason behind her death. The prime suspects were a group of boys Jennifer taught at the public high school in Riverdale. The question that rang in the mind of anyone who came across the case was, why would a group of students murder their teacher in the most gruesome way possible? 39-year-old Jennifer Holson was a sweet and sunny woman. Born in April 1980 to a middle-class family, Jennifer had been identified as a child who was passionate about helping others grow. She always went out of her way to make sure people had enough knowledge. She stood out among her peers due to her sunny and bright approach to life. Jennifer was never one to complain about lacking anything, as she saw every inadequacy as an opportunity to work on herself and get better at her craft. Her optimistic nature made her loved in Riverdale. Everyone around her loved her resilient and positive attitude towards life, not only because she always found a way to make people smile, but also because of her ever-bright smile. Jennifer was a firm believer in the French type of love. She believed in passionate and unwavering love and would exhibit this in her past relationships. To Jennifer, love was a pure feeling that was meant to be felt in the most passionate and consuming way ever. This was how she felt when she first met Peter Holson at the local cinema before watching one of her favorite soap operas. Peter's face was what had caught her attention. She could not believe that any man could look so good, and she found herself glancing at him at every interval. It was love at first sight for her. The same could be said for Peter, who had noticed Jennifer when he first entered the cinema. Her bright, contagious smile warmed his heart, and when she turned in his direction, it felt like everyone else in the room had disappeared, and it was just the two of them. He could not stop stealing glances at her all through the movie, and when the movie ended, he had decided that she was his missing rib. He approached her at the end of the movie, and their beautiful love story came to life from then. The two loved each other so passionately that people had reasons to believe that they were obsessed with each other. None of them could do without the other. It was as though they lived for each other. Their love story was exactly what Jennifer always wanted, and she could not get enough of this love. Their relationship was the envy of the entire Riverdale. Jennifer had found her perfect match, and it was so beautiful to see. The two got married on Jennifer's 30th birthday, in a tranquil wedding by the sea, which had always been Jennifer's dream wedding, and no one was more happy than she was on her wedding day. It was indeed a beautiful love story. However, this passionate love story between Jennifer and Peter started dwindling when Peter got a promotion to his job as the managing director of his firm. At first, Jennifer celebrated her husband's achievement. She threw a lavish dinner party in honor of her husband and invited all their friends and family. At the party, Peter publicly reaffirmed his ever-burning love for his wife. Jennifer, overwhelmed with emotions, made a vow to forever love her husband. Little did she know what she was getting into. As expected, Peter's new position at his job cost him more than just dinner celebrations. He had less time for everything else other than work. He returned home later than 10 p.m. If it wasn't a meeting with the board, it was a dinner with an important client. It was as though Peter's newfound love was his job. Anyone who knew him could tell that there had been a change in his personality. He bailed out on every special event with his wife and always bought her luxurious gifts as a means of apology, but Jennifer did not want this. She wanted her partner back, the one who loved her so passionately and could not do without her, and not the one who barely remembered their marriage anniversary. As time went on, it became obvious that Peter had gotten drunk with the desire for success and would never stop chasing success in his career path. There was always a partnership he needed, a meeting he had to attend, a requirement he had to meet. Every night he spent burying his head in his job cost him a part of his marriage. Jennifer became withdrawn and isolated as a result of this. She tried to talk to Peter about it, and even tried rekindling their love by doing the things Peter loved about her when they had first met. But nothing could revive Peter's already dead love. Jennifer knew this, but she couldn't let the world see that her once beautiful love story had turned sour, so she kept on with the appearance in public. She made it seem like Peter was still head over heels for her. She flaunts the luxurious gifts Peter gets her as an apology for bailing out on her to anyone who cares to listen. To her family and friends, she was a happy and fulfilled woman who had a loving partner and a job she was passionate about. But beneath the facade, Jennifer was just a broken woman who needed to be loved the right way. She wanted to feel the thrill of being loved passionately like it had been with Peter at first. Little by little, the change in Jennifer's life reflected in her job and the way she interacted with people. Her bright and sunny personality was gone and replaced by a more silent, withdrawn, and aggressive personality. Nothing seemed to please her anymore, and no matter how hard anyone tried, nothing ever seemed right to her. She became the total opposite of who she used to be. According to some of her students, Mrs. Holson had the most intense change we've ever seen. She went from being one of her favorite teachers to the teacher no student wanted to encounter. Aside from her students who get to witness the change every day, no one seemed to notice anything different about her due to the way she kept up with her pretend game. This was the reason nobody could tell the shift in her attitude when John Denver came into her life. John was a 19-year-old high school student who had moved to Riverdale with his mother and siblings months after their parents got divorced. John suffered the consequences of the divorce more than his other siblings. He had grown up in the love of his parents, who had a seemingly perfect marriage. Their household was nothing short of perfect, so nothing prepared him for the disaster that came crashing when his parents' marriage turned sour. It was hard for John to accept that his parents would not be together anymore, but the move down to Riverdale was even harder for him to deal with. He became rebellious and the complete opposite of the delightful, obedient kid he was. His mother, Mary Denver, tried everything she could to make John feel better and return to how he used to be, but nothing she tried worked. John was bent on hating her for ruining their perfect life. When he was enrolled in the high school where Jennifer taught and was assigned to her class, he stopped at nothing to express his displeasure until he had a personal encounter with Jennifer. It was on a rainy afternoon after school had closed. The rain came down in torrents after a large number of students had left for their homes. John was standing by the school gate, wondering how to get home under the heavy storm, when someone gave him an umbrella and started walking ahead into the room. He was stunned by the kindness, and after seeing that it was his new teacher, Jennifer, it felt like the universe had finally given him a concrete reason to attend school. From that day on, John did everything possible to be noticed by his teacher, because not only did he want to show his gratitude for her act of kindness, he was starting to see her in another light. He no longer saw her as his teacher, but as someone he had a huge crush on. Jennifer became his reason to be in school every day. He made sure to be the first person to get to class and the last to leave. He talked about her everywhere, at home with his family, on the football pitch with his friends. He just couldn't stop talking and talking about her. On the other hand, Jennifer was starting to feel the same way as he did. She had noticed him the first time he was assigned to her, and her breath had stopped when she saw how masculine he looked. He reminded her of the first time she saw Peter at the cinema. It felt like her life was replaying before her eyes when she saw him, and she almost couldn't stop staring at him the entire day in class. When she got home that day, she broke down terribly and cried as guilt filled her heart for the immoral way she thought of her student. She was supposed to be a role model and someone who helped to shape the life of her student, but instead she was having profane thoughts about him. This is all Peter's fault. She blamed her husband. If only he hadn't replaced her with his job, she would never have looked at her 19-year-old student with so much desire in her heart. Peter never returned home that night, and Jennifer drank herself to sleep. After that day, Jennifer gave John preferential treatment in class. She overlooked his mistakes and never corrected him. Instead, she showered him with so much love that other students began to suspect that something was going on between the two. Their first kiss finally happened during a camping trip the school organized a few months after John's enrollment in the school. Jennifer had been in charge of looking after the students' welfare, but at some point, it became overwhelming for her to deal with a bunch of teenagers who would not stick to her instructions. So she went to one of the secluded rooms to take a break. John saw her leaving and followed her. He had seen the way the other students acted towards her, and he felt bad. He wanted to make her feel better in any way. When he got to the room she was in, he was surprised to see her lying half naked on the bed, staring at nothing in particular. In that split second, he had no idea what came over him as he walked to her and kissed her as passionately as he could. Jennifer, although caught by surprise, matched his ferociousness, and when they finally broke the kiss, it was obvious that something had changed between them. One thing led to another, and they made love that evening and found ways to do it every other day of the camp trip. They did it everywhere, in the bush, in Jennifer's room, and any other place they found themselves alone. Jennifer knew the risks involved in getting caught having an affair with her student, but she enjoyed it way too much to care what anyone thought. For John, he could not get enough of the thrill and passion that came with finally sharing something so sensual with his teacher. For Jennifer, the nostalgic feeling she got from the encounter was second to none. She enjoyed the youthful adrenaline pumping in John, and every time they had sex, she always wanted more. After the trip, it became somewhat hard for them to be together, but Jennifer soon found a way around it. They met at motels far away from where they stayed and often spent quality time together. As time went on, the relationship morphed into something deeper than casual sex. The two soon began personal secrets with each other. They comforted each other and relished the times they spent together. Jennifer knew she wasn't doing the right thing by holding on to the relationship with John. She knew he was young and was falling in love with her, yet she refused to stop the affair because she believed that, with time, John would realize that a proper relationship between them was impossible and would grow out of his feelings, but little did she know that that would never happen. John started feeling bad about not being able to express his love for her publicly. He wanted to show her off as his woman, but Jennifer would not allow it. She knew how detrimental it would be to her image as a teacher and a member of her community. When John realized that he would never get a chance to show her off publicly, he started boasting about his relationship with her among his friends. He would tell them that he was the only one who could make her happy, as she wasn't happy in her marriage and was only pretending to keep up with the public's view of her marriage. His closest friends were 20-year-old Jack Stewart, 18-year-old Michael Cooper, and 19-year-old Tommy Anderson. They were the only ones who knew the depth of John's affection for their teacher. However, Jack wasn't pleased with this arrangement. Peter Anderson was one of the people he looked up to, synonymous with a die-hard fan, and he couldn't believe that his mentor's marriage wasn't as perfect as everyone thought it was. He hated the fact that Jennifer would cheat on her husband with a mere high schooler, and he was determined to take revenge on behalf of his mentor. He secretly nurtured hate against the relationship, but was able to keep up a fake smile whenever John talked about Jennifer. He waited patiently, like a predator waiting on its prey for a day something would go wrong between Jennifer and John, and then he would get a chance to ruin the relationship. He did not have to wait for too long. Jack's moment finally came one afternoon when Jennifer asked a question in class and John had raised his hand to answer the question but got it wrong. Jennifer made a snarky comment about John not knowing the appropriate time to talk. Everyone in the class laughed, but Jack watched the interaction between the teacher and his friend, and he could tell that something was off somewhere. John's ego was bruised by Jennifer's action, and he sulked throughout the day. After the school closed, Jack rushed to John with their other friends. He laughed loudly at John for being stupid and letting Jennifer make a fool of him in class in the presence of their classmates. If there's anything John hated, it was being made fun of. He got angry and got into a fight with Jack. The fight became intense, and Jack dared John to do something about his lover. John, angry, saw Jennifer leaving the school premises and walked quietly behind her, plotting a devious way to punish her for making fun of him in class. His friends walked behind him as he followed her towards a bush path. It happened all of a sudden, and Jennifer would never have expected what happened next. John pulled her forcefully by the hair into the bush, and despite her cries for help, the only thing he could see was Jack laughing at his face. He picked up one of the logs of wood lying in the bush and hit it on her head. His friends appeared from behind him and watched as he continued hurting her with the wood until she almost gave up the ghost. When he checked her pulse and felt her breathing faintly, He took off his clothes and raped her right there in the bush. He beckoned on his friends and invited them to have a share of their teacher. At that moment, Jack felt like the happiest person in the world. He couldn't believe that his words would have been able to trigger John into losing control. He relished every minute he spent on Jennifer's lifeless body. After having sexual intercourse with Jennifer's lifeless body, Jack brought out the tines he had been hiding in the woods and handed them over to John. In that moment of rage, John stabbed Jennifer's face and belly with it. He passed it around his friends, and they all took turns stabbing her till she took her last breath. They dug a shallow hole and buried Jennifer's body in it. The boys returned to school to change their bloodied clothes, but Jack was the happiest of them. He had found a way to take out his mentor's cheating partner without doing so much. The next couple of days went by quickly, and Jennifer's disappearance became obvious in the community. A couple of her friends went to report her disappearance at the police station. The cops had no idea what they were about to stumble on when they started investigating the case. According to Ava Riorson, the chief detective of the Riverdale Police Department, they'd never seen a more frightening murder in all their lives. The boys were arrested when the school CCTV showed them trailing Jennifer into the woods, and it also showed them returning to the school 3 hours later with blood on their clothes. Forensics also identified the semen on Jennifer's corpse as each of the boys. It was obvious that there was no escape for them. After their arrests, all the boys except Jack knew they were in grave trouble and felt remorseful for their actions. John confessed to killing Jennifer and told the police all about his affair with her up until her death. He also confessed to being instigated by Jack's words and actions. He led them to where they buried Jennifer's body, and it shocked the detectives to see what the boys did to their teacher. Despite how the police tried to make Jack feel remorse and own up to his crime, he was not dazed, not even by the threat of jail. According to him, Peter was a good man who cared about taking care of his wife, and he did not deserve being cheated on by his wife. Peter was devastated when he got the news of his wife's affair and death. He blamed himself for choosing his job over his wife, and for causing her death. During an interview with a reporter when he was asked what he would do if he got another chance, he said, "I'll never let her out of my sight. I'll commit every minute of my life to her. I wish I could do it now, but it is too late." It was nothing like anyone in Riverdale had seen. This gruesome murder had stripped the town of its innocence. These 4 boys had done the unthinkable. 4 months later, the trial for their case was held, and the whole town stood still. Everyone wanted to know what would eventually be the fate of the boys. Despite pleading guilty to get a lower sentence, John Denver, Tommy Anderson, and Michael Cooper were sentenced to 45 years imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jack was, however, sentenced to life for his actions. The judge said it would be dangerous to let someone like him back into society. This is the story of a teacher-student affair gone wrong. Want to see more like this? Then click on the video you are seeing on your screen now.